Hi, I'm David Moshew, and this is Crash Course World History. And today we're going to be talking about World War II. So, here at Crash Course, we're trying to make history entertainment, and World War II the funniest of them all. Except not at all. Right, so you've heard a lot about World War II from the movies and books. We're not going to try to give you this elaborate summary of the war today. Instead, we're going to try to give you a bit of perspective on how the most destructive war in human history happened, and why it still matters in the world today. Like, when did World War II start? In September 1939, when the Nazis invaded Poland? I don't think so. It actually started when Japan invaded Manchuria in 1931, or at the very latest, when the Japanese invaded China in 1937. But you could also argue 1933, when Hitler took power, or 1941, when America started fighting. It's very complicated. It all starts with the Japanese invasion of Manchuria in 1931, giving Japan all this power, thinking that they can conquer anything. So, with their new amped up ego, Japan begins to attack port cities in China. Then, on December 7th, 1941, the Empire of Japan invaded Thailand and attacked British possessions in Malaya, Singapore, and Hong Kong, as well as the United States military base in Pearl Harbor. Pearl Harbor is also known as a Day of Infamy from FDR, led to the United States' entry into World War II. This surprise military attack was intended to prevent the U.S. fleet from interfering with the military actions of the Empire of Japan, was planning in Southeast Asia against overseas territories of the United Kingdom, the Netherlands, and the United States. Instead of the United States staying out of the war, it gave them the momentum they needed to start their offensive strike. Allied forces pushed the Japanese back in a series of attacks that were part of a new Allied effort. The Japanese then retaliated with two invasions that were quickly shut down by British and Chinese troops. American forces moved towards Japan, taking Iwo Jima by March and Okinawa by the end of June in 1945. The stubborn Japanese just don't want to give up and continue to ignore the Potsdam terms issued to them on July 27th. Not a very wise decision, because soon after, the United States dropped atomic bombs on the cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in early August. Finally, on August 15th, 1945, Japan surrendered with the documents finally signed, and the war came to a close. Now we're going to have a guest speaker, Courtney, talk about the European theater.
Now onto the other side of the war, the European theater. People argue that the actual starting date of the war is when Hitler came to power in 1933. Hadler is the rare individual who really did make history. Specifically, he made it worse. And he hadn't existed, it's very unlikely that World War II would have never happened. In the beginning, it was characterized by a new style of combat made possible by the mechanized technology of tanks, airplanes, and especially trucks. This was the Blitzkrieg, and devastated the tactic combining quick movement of troops, tanks, and massive use of their power to support infantry movements. Now we have another special guest, Lauren Westphal, for the open letter.
Open letter. A letter from Adolf Hitler. Dear Herr Gimlet, the danger posed by Jewry of our people today finds expression in the undeniable aversion of wide sections of our people. The cause of this aversion is not to be found in a clear recognition of the consciously or unconsciously systematic and pernicious effect of the Jews as a totality upon our nation. Rather, it arises mostly from personal contact and from the personal impression which the individual Jew leaves, almost always an unfavorable one. For this reason, anti-Semitism is too easily characterized as a mere emotional phenomenon. And yet, this is incorrect. Anti-Semitism is a political movement. As a political movement, may not and cannot be defined by emotional impulses, but by recognition of the facts. The facts are these. First, Jewry is absolutely a race and not a religious association. Even the Jews never designate themselves as Jewish Germans, Jewish Poles, or Jewish Americans, but always as German, Polish, or American Jews. Jews have never yet adopted much more than the language of the foreign nations among whom they live. A German who is forced to make use of the French language in France, Italian in Italy, and Chinese in China does not thereby become a Frenchman, Italian, or Chinaman. It's the same way with the Jew who lives among us and is forced to make use of the German language. He does not thereby become a German, neither does the Mosaic pig. So important for the survival of this race, settled the question of whether someone is a Jew or a non-Jew. There is scarcely a race whose members belong exclusively to just one definite religion.
So here's a quick timeline of the start of the war. On the 1st of September 1939, Germany invades Poland. After the invasion of September 3rd, the UK and France declared war on Germany, and Britain sent troops to France. On September 17th, the Soviet forces joined the invasion. After overrunning the Netherlands, Belgium, and Luxembourg, Germany turned against France. The French had made the fatal mistake of leaving their area almost totally undefended, believing its terrain be impassable for tanks and other vehicles. Oh, the poor ignorant French. This listed 6 weeks, including the Luftwaffe bombing of Paris on June 3rd. After knocking out most of Central Europe, the Nazis sent their sights on Great Britain, but they didn't invade the island, choosing instead to attack it with massive airstrikes. The operations of Luftwaffe against the Royal Air Force became known as the Battle of Britain. Germany then launches an invasion on the Soviet Union, which was given the code name Operation Barbarossa. This was considered the bloodiest conflict in world history, with 1 million civilians killed. Okay, we're going to skip most of the big battles of 1942, like the Battle of Midway, which effectively ended Japan's chance of winning the war, and focus on the Battle of Stalingrad. Soon after the Operation Barbarossa, German troops surrendered on February 2nd, 1943 at the Battle of Stalingrad, which killed about 1.5 million people. The following year, over 180,000 troops were brought to shore on Normandy in what is called Operation Overlord. On June 6, 1994, this created a beachhead, or the defended position on the shore, to launch attack. That brought over 3 million Allied soldiers to Germany's Western Front. The large amount of Allied troops led to Operation Dragon, this invasion of southern France on August 15th. That April, Mussolini was captured by Italian partitions as the Allied troops closed in on Milan. A few days later, Adolf Hitler committed suicide in his bunker to avoid being captured by the Soviet troops. This led to Admiral Donitz surrendering to Americans, British, and Soviets on May 8, 1945. 3 months later, the United States dropped the only nuclear weapons ever deployed in war. Japan surrendered, and World War II was over. So why is World War II so important? Because in a total war, when a nation as a whole is at war, not just the nation's army, there is no more line between civilian and target. And how can we forget the Holocaust, which was used to slaughter millions? Throughout the war, we saw many modern nations which were thriving and represented the Enlightenment and scientific revelation the best, fall into an unimaginable cruelty. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next week.